In this video I'm going to show you how I'm using photogrammetry to digitize objects. In brief, photogrammetry is a method where photos are used to ascertain distances and to create 3D objects. The application includes topographical mapping, forensics, archaeology, conservation, as well as special effects, video game making, animation, etc. I'm interested in this process for its applications to reverse engineering parts or tools and to create things I can 3D print. It's a relatively cost-effective technique because you can scale up depending on your budget and access to equipment. But it can be done as simply with the camera on your mobile phone, a selfie plop, and free open source software, or with more sophisticated setups including automatic turntables, camera triggers, and higher quality cameras. I'll get straight to it. On screen now, I'm finding the center of an electronic turntable. Using a piece of card which has a 90-degree corner, I intersect the circumference and draw a line between the 2 points. Do this twice and you find the center of your circle. The turntable is by a company called Chroma, which I purchased from AliExpress. It has software which can be used to trigger the remote shutter on a camera, as well as varying the turning increments and dwell time. It's a bit overkill, and a rotating serviette, which you could draw incremental markings onto and turn manually, would work fine, or even just manually turn the object you're photographing by hand. Around that goes a particle board backdrop support structure that I had designed and made. I'll show you that in 3D and quickly share what it does. So this is the 3D model of the photogrammetry rig, and you can see it's made out of 4 sections, and what you can't see on this model is that I placed a couple pieces of 2x1 at the bottom to raise it to the correct height, although when I designed this model I was planning to use adjustable feet which had these mounting holes here. And the other thing that you can't see from the video is that I routed a rebate along the top and upper edge of the back piece so that I could use border clips to hold bits of paper and backdrops in place. I'm now fixing the backdrop onto the stand, and I'm using luminescent green card. The advantage of using this uniform backdrop, which I'll demonstrate later, is in the application of digital masks to the photos in the photogrammetry software. This essentially helps identify areas in the photo which are the object and will provide the relevant data when creating the model. I tried a few different colour backdrops, but green seemed to work the best, although it will impact the final colour render by reflecting a green hue onto the object. I also cut a circle out from the bottom piece of card for the object that I'll be photographing, although this happens to sit on this specimen stand that I 3D printed, and which I'll now show you in the 3D modelling software. The top is tapered and accepts a sewing pin, which I superglue into position. The bottom has a corner point which is in line with the centre of the stand, and which I can align to the point I drew earlier on the turntable. If these are not aligned, the object could move out of the camera's frame. The stand is held in position with some painter's masking tape. Along with that, I also made this dice, which fits on top and helps with the digitization process. Annoyingly, the software I'm using, which is Agisoft Metashape standard version 1.7.0, doesn't recognize targets, which are like QR codes you can place around your object or on your object and help identify areas in the photos. I found this method of using a geometric shape next to the one I was trying to capture helped produce better quality 3D models. I then had to pick something to scan, and a peanut was the clear, standout choice. Packed with protein and high in fibre, encased in a hard although not so impenetrable shell, it's not too small but with plenty of recognisable detail. That is then placed on the end of the pin. Note the small gap between the peanut and the dice. This is to make it a little easier to separate the unwanted part in the 3D model later. I have also placed some white card to either side of the peanut to reflect light from the front to the sides of the object. This will make it look a little more even and neutral when photographed, minimizing shadows. The turntable software is a bit fiddly to use and will automatically start moving when powered, but I made sure to stop all movement, mute the device, set the 0 point, set the max number of triggers I wanted, and to then select the segments of rotations which included a 4-second dwell and automatic shutter trigger. You could adjust this if necessary, either with the available buttons or somehow typing out the correct CT code, which is described in a PDF manual that you'll have to find and download. I'll quickly describe what the numbers within the brackets next to CT plus start refer to. The first number refers to the rotational direction, 0 being turning left or clockwise and 1 being the opposite. After that comma is the turning mode where 0 is continuous, 1 is intermittent and 2 is swing. Following that is the remote shutter mode, where 0 is off and 1 is automatic. You then have the rotational angle, which if you want a full 360-degree rotation will be 360 divided by the number of triggers or repeated instances, which is the last number. Then you have the number of seconds the turntable will pause or dwell while the camera takes a photo. Note the camera trigger instance occurs at the halfway point of this number, so in this case the camera will operate at 2 seconds. And finally you have the times this is repeated or the number of instances this occurs. Remember, to get a full rotation this number is divided by 360 and the angle is written after the third comma. I'll now describe some aspects about the camera settings. While you can do photogrammetry with pretty much any camera and even a mobile phone, if you have one with full manual mode and a sharp lens, the results will be better. The trick is to make sure the object is fully in focus by being within the depth of field, which is the closest and furthest points that are in focus. To get the sharpest possible picture, make sure to close the aperture while ensuring the image is exposed properly and the ISO settings are not causing the image to become grainy. Closing the aperture to f22 increases the depth of field but can cause diffraction problems, so many photographers prefer to use apertures between f8 and f11. I'm using a 16 to 80mm lens which can zoom onto the subject. I position the lens about 40 cm away from the object, which I then zoom into. I aim to position the nut into the depth of field so it's not at the starting edge of what is in focus, which prevents it from moving out of focus if not entirely centered when the turntable rotates. Lighting is also very important as it will allow you to explore the full aperture range. I'm using a fairly inexpensive USB powered beautifying ring light along with some reflection cards. You will undoubtedly need to do some trial and error to find the sharpest image quality for your camera and lens. If you find diffraction is a problem, you may need to drop your aperture down to between f16 and f8 and change exposure times. But once you've found the best settings for your camera, document them so you can quickly recreate them when necessary. Along with the rotational images of the object, you may also need an image of the background to help make the digital masks. To do this, I half press the shutter button so the peanut is in focus and then lift it off the specimen stand along with the dice. I then fully press the shutter, taking the photograph of the background with the same focal distance as the other images. So I'm now going to show you the workflow I use to create the 3D model from the photos. And to begin with, I need to import my images, and I've got 32 in total, and they're placed into a chunk. If you have multiple cameras or you take photos from different angles, you will subsequently put your collection of photos in different chunks. You then need to apply the mask to the images, and you do that by right clicking and importing the mask under the mask menu and writing the name of the file which contains the mask in this section here, and we're going to be doing it from a background image. Now you then need to navigate to the folder that contains that image. You select the folder and then the software starts the process. This can take several minutes. You can see the detail describing what is happening at the moment, and that's generating the masks. Once that's done, you can actually view the mask by pressing this button here, and if you want to, you can further improve by selecting something like the intelligent scissors. And manually getting rid of sections. Once you've created a shape around the bit you want to get rid of, you press Ctrl Shift A to remove it, and Ctrl-Shift-S if you want to add it. I think in retrospect I should have used some sort of blue masking tape to differentiate the cube a bit more than the background, because it's kind of reflecting a bit of the colour onto it. And the other thing I should have done was 3D printed the stand in green so it was the same as the background. So I'm going to carry on doing this for the rest of these images, and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like when I move on to the next step. Okay, I've gone over all the individual images and improved the masks so that they are highlighting the areas that I want to focus on when producing the 3D model. And the first thing I need to do is align the photos. So start with medium. You can see the settings I have here. I'm going to press OK and let that do its thing. Can then go to the 3D view and just have a quick look to see what that looks like. And you can see the images look pretty circular, so that's not bad. Okay, so the images look quite good, and if I click on this button here, you can see a sparse cloud model of the peanut with the dice. What we're going to do next is go to Tools and optimize the cameras, and select all these views, press OK. That's slightly adjusted the camera views, and we can also use this tool here, gradual selection and reconstruction uncertainty, to select anything that might be considered a little bit off. Might only do it to 0.4, press OK and then delete, and that just deletes any random floaty dots. The next stage is to go back to Workflow and build the dense cloud. We're going to change that to medium with an aggressive depth filter, and it's going to calculate the point color and the point confidence. And this will take several minutes depending on your computer hardware. Boom, and that's done. And we can make that visible by pressing this button here, and you can see pretty good rendition of the actual object, even with that tiny little tail there at the bottom. Save that. Next you can build the mesh, and these are my settings here. This should work out a little bit quicker than the previous step. Okay, that's done, and to see the model, just pressing that button there. You can see there's quite a bit of detail there, and then if I want to just get rid of the bottom there, and then I've got something that I can export as an STL file and 3D print. And here's what I made with the 3D scan of the peanut over the Christmas holiday. Is it gonna work? I didn't buy anybody anything this year, and instead made this candle for the dinner table. Whoa. So while I was eating my roast dinner, I could chuckle to myself at the absurdity of the peanut candle. Anyway, I'm going to leave this video here. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to sacrifice a thumb to the algorithm gods, and you'll catch me in the next one.